Hey there, my meaty friends. This is Reed, aka CarnivorousChef, aka Eggy Boy. My Instagram family made me proud and got 1,000 likes on this impromptu chuck roast shakshuka I made over there. So for that, here's the full recipe video. For this one, I went ahead and made a whole chuck roast instead of scrounging for some leftovers. Why don't we just go ahead and get started by pulling out a device that I've never used until this video, the Instant Pot. Feel free to make your chuck roast however you want, but for today, let's start off by turning an Instant Pot to saute. Add in some sort of oil or animal fat to the pan to get a light sear on the chuck roast. Season heavily with salt and pepper and flip a few times until you're satisfied with its doneness. After that, pour in 1 1/2 cups of water or beef broth. Place the lid on and reset the pot to manual for 50 minutes. Ensure the pressure release valve is on and let it do its thing. It'll take 15 minutes for the Instant Pot to pressurize, 50 minutes for it to cook, and 15 minutes for it to rest. Once the time is up and your pressure is released, you should be left with a roast that's easily pulled apart and some good broth. Remove this meat from your liquid while reserving the liquid and give it a rough chop. Right here you can see the protein strands should pull apart with ease. Next up, place a pan over medium-high heat and add in 1 tablespoon of butter and let that melt. Once melted, add in all of your beef and give this a sear for a couple minutes on both sides to give it some color. Once seared, add in the following spices: 1 1/2 teaspoons of smoked paprika, a 1/2 teaspoon of granulated onion, and a 1/2 teaspoon of ground cumin. Mix this around for about 1 minute to get the spices toasted before adding in 1 cup of your broth. Bring this to a simmer for about a minute before we crack in 4 eggs. The eggs can cook this way, but let's expedite the process by placing a lid on top, or in my case, a piece of foil. This will help steam the eggs as well as give us a dramatic presentation. If you want to fancy the picture up, top it with some sort of herb of your choice. If herbs hurt you or offend you, please feel free to avoid them. I just need a pretty picture. Hey there, my meaty friends. This is Reed, aka CarnivorousChef, aka Spicy Boy. In this video, I wanted to make something I've been thinking about for a few months. I made something at the park where I just took chorizo and ground beef and just cooked it together. It was so close to chili that I had to develop the actual recipe. So this is what I'll call cheater chili. If you want, you can just call it chorizo chili, chill chili, salivary stew, or just chili. Really, call it whatever you want, but I'm going to get started. The star of the show here is chorizo. Here I have 20 ounces of beef and pork chorizo. This is a complete accident. Feel free to use one or the other if you don't like one of them. You'll also need a couple pounds of ground beef, some beef stock, and what I may or may not use later on to add any potential flavors, cumin and coriander. I just don't know yet. Oh, and never forget the salt and pepper. To start this recipe, place a pot over medium-high heat and break up your ground beef into it. We're going to brown this off and drain it. If you don't want to drain it, that's up to you. That's just you cooking. Give this beef about a teaspoon of salt. I started with a spatula to get the beef broken up, but then I remembered that there's a superior tool to do this: the potato masher. If you've been carnivore for a while, this may be the first time that you've actually used this, and its sole purpose wasn't to block the drawer from opening. Get this beef as fine as you want it. Again, drain if you want, I want. Now let's take care of this chorizo. Get it into the pan still over medium-high heat and begin to break this up too. I added 20 grams of optional collagen to help with the sauce later. Mix it in and then add all of your cooked ground beef. I don't know what I was waiting for by mixing the meats together, but feel free to go ahead and just add in your beef stock. You'll need 2 1/2 cups worth. I let this come to a boil before finally tasting, and I've got to say, you can totally stop right here if you want. I, however, wanted to add a touch more flavor. I added in 1 teaspoon of ground cumin, a 1/4 teaspoon of ground coriander, and a 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper. As always, adjust to your taste buds. Add salt if you think it needs more. The salt I added during the ground beef phase was plenty for me. I let mine simmer until thickened, and that only took about 10 minutes. Serve this up however you want. Add a little bit of sour cream, a sprinkling of cheddar, and a few thin slices of jalapeno, mostly for color. We can finally give this a taste. If you're worried about the red oil at the top, stop worrying because that's chorizo oil and it's pure red gold. Hey there, my meaty friends. This is Reed, aka CarnivorousChef, aka Boudin Boy. If you've seen my chicken cordon bleu meatball video, you might know that I ran a little contest on my Instagram. You should definitely go follow my Instagram because I plan on doing more of these. But people ran wild with it, and a few of the answers I got me thinking. Boudin balls is one of the first ones that struck me and made me wonder why I haven't even thought to make it. Maybe it's the rice, and the fact that I'm allergic to rice, that led me to completely disregard it. However, I felt the strongest urge to make them after reading that comment, so here's me doing that. To start, walk in with a soft wiggle, and then grab yourself some pork shoulder of some sort. I get these country style ribs because it's just pork shoulder cut up into strips. A lot of the times it won't even say pork shoulder, but it'll just say country style ribs. This is a great option if you don't feel like getting an entire pork shoulder. Anyways, let's get these fake ribs out and give them a very generous seasoning. This is almost 3 pounds of pork, and I used about a tablespoon of salt for all of it. Get every square inch coated because it definitely needs it. Throw this into an oven at 450 degrees Fahrenheit or 230 degrees Celsius. We want to let it get some good color there, so let it go for about 30 minutes in a convection oven or 40 minutes in a conventional oven. In the meantime, let's get our main flavors together. I'll be avoiding fresh veggies for the obvious reasons, and instead opt for dried spices. But feel free to do whatever you want here. In a bowl, you'll want to add in a quarter cup of smoked paprika, 1 tablespoon of celery salt, 1.5 tablespoons of granulated garlic, 1 tablespoon of granulated onion, 1 teaspoon of ground cayenne pepper, and finally a quarter teaspoon of black pepper. Give that a hot whisking and then stick your face in it and breathe deep. Oh yeah, that's good. Set that aside while we deal with our now well roasted pork. Add in 4 cups of water or stock of your choice, as well as 3 tablespoons of your newly made spice mixture. We want this braised semi-low and semi-slow, so cover it very tightly with aluminum foil and place it back into your oven. However, this time set your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit or 175 degrees Celsius. Let it cook for an hour and 15 minutes in convection oven or an hour and a half in a conventional oven. While that's in the oven again, we could take care of our livers. Place a pan over medium-high heat along with 2 tablespoons of ghee or butter. I added in a half pound of chicken livers and gave them a hard sear. Once I finally flipped them, I decided to add in about a tablespoon of the Cajun spice we made earlier. Flip these occasionally and cook until they're about medium. Once they're, set them aside, and it's finally time to pull out our pork. It should be nicely falling apart tender. Remove the pork from the pan, reserving the braising liquid. We're about to be grinding this, so we want to give this a rough chop. Also, if you have a grinder, use the largest grinding plate you have. I did a review on this grinder, but nobody seemed to care, and if you want to see that review, I'll post the link to the video down in the description. Grind or chop up all of your little porky cubes, followed by your chicken livers. What you're looking for is a loose yet fine texture on the pork, and the liver should be creamy. Now we've got that all ground up, let's fortify it. Add in 2 teaspoons of the only hot sauce I had on hand, along with 2 teaspoons of salt, 2 teaspoons of our spice mix, about 2 tablespoons of pork rinds, and 1 egg as a binder, and finally about a 1/3 cup of our braising liquid. Thoroughly mix this by hand before throwing it into our fridge for about an hour to chill out. Once out, we can finally bread these puppies, little boudin puppies. Grab a sheet tray and spread out some of the pork rinds. Make a meatball by any means necessary. I'm using a cookie dough scoop to make mine much less of a hassle. Roll it around on the pork rinds and then press it in. Complete the round shape based on your OCD needs. Finish up with the rest of your ingredients until you're done. And once you're done making these, about 24 to 30 of them, place them back into your oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit or 175 degrees Celsius for 15 to 20 minutes or until crispy on the outside. Here is the second part of my Patreon community suggested videos. In the first one, we ground up some pork for this video. If you're interested in checking that one out after watching this one, the link will be in the description below. A Bear from Patreon suggested the pork pie recipe, thank you for that, and I thought it'd only be proper to have someone with the correct accent to do the voiceover. With that out of the way, let's begin by introducing Haley, aka Super Meat Girl, to this video. So here you go.
To start this recipe, we need some ground pork and ground smoky bacon. 8 ounces or 225 grams of each to be precise. This is enough pork to fit a 6-inch or 15cm spring-form pan. For our herbs and spices, let's start with some dried thyme leaves. You'll need half a teaspoon along with a 1/4 teaspoon of dried rosemary and a 1/4 teaspoon of cracked black pepper. Get your hands in there to ensure these spices are evenly distributed. If you're curious about the salt, you can add 1.5 teaspoons now, but it will draw out a lot of the water while we let this rest. Save the salt until after we cover a cling wrap and let rest for a minimum of 2 hours and up to overnight. Whilst we're waiting on this to rest, let's make our pastry crust. For this you'll need 3 ounces or 85 grams of ground pork rinds, 3 large eggs. In an attempt to look cool, try to crack the eggs with one hand and obliterate one of them in the process. And finally, 1 teaspoon of baking powder. Please use your favourite pocket knife to measure this. Give the spoon a break this week and whisk it up. This will be a pretty thick dough, so knock it out of the whisk if it clumps up. Okay, we absolutely do not want this pie to stick, so slap down about a tablespoon of butter and spread it all over your springform pan. Next up, we'll want about 60% of our dough. All we need to do here is work it around the sides as well as we can. You're looking for a couple of inches up to the side of the pan. Now grab about 20% more of your dough and spread it across the bottom, ensuring to crimp the inside seam. And once you're satisfied that it's all closed up, take your refrigerated meat and place it into the shell. Spread it out to the edges of your dough. To use up the final 20% of the dough, grab 2 pieces of parchment paper that you've greased up well. Place your dough into the middle of it and press something flat against it to get the beginning shape. Now press out with your hands until your top shell is as wide as the pan. Getting it out of the paper will be slightly difficult, but just do what you can to get it on top. You can always touch up and repatch where needed. As you can see, Reed definitely had to do that. Once you've got it how you like it, take out your favourite pocket knife again and poke a couple of holes into the middle to relieve steam whilst cooking. Place this into an oven that's set to 400 degrees Fahrenheit or 205 degrees Celsius for a total of 20 minutes. After the 20 minutes, reduce the heat to 300 degrees Fahrenheit or 150 degrees Celsius for an additional hour to let the pork cook completely. We still have a few more steps before we can dig in, so don't you go getting too excited. Let this cool off at room temperature before injecting some sort of pork gelatin into the pie. Reed got his from cooking the leftover pork and refrigerating the drippings. You'll need at least 1/4 cup or 60 millilitres. Place this into the fridge and let set for at least 3 hours, but overnight would produce much better results. And here it is. Reed was able to get the texture with a combination of pork rinds and eggs, and this has yet again blown his mind. A hollow thump and a crispy exterior. Cutting into this has left Reed slightly baffled as to where the gelatin might have escaped to. But after taking his first bite, he's realised that it's absorbed into the bottom crust. Don't mind Reed whilst he marvels at this delicious treat that he's only just discovered.